We have been seeing a stunning phenomenon with about 100 million Americans voting early, either by mailing in ballots or depositing them in drop boxes and election centers. A big question, what has turnout been today? We are on track to have the largest vote in history, but there's also a different kind of phenomenon. Philadelphia and other cities across the country are storing up and boarding up for fear that there will be civil unrest as a result of the election. That is not something we ordinarily expect to see on election night in the United States, but these are not ordinary times. So let me introduce to you our guests for this half hour. Our Democratic analyst is former Philadelphia mayor and currently professor at Columbia University, Michael Nutter. On the Republican side, strategist Alison Young. And from the Committee of 70, David Thornburgh. Folks, let me see if I can set this up just a little bit tonight. As you know, we don't elect our presidents with a popular vote, but the candidates vie state by state for electoral votes. 270 wins the White House. This year, we're saying there are 6 battleground states and a bunch of toss-ups. Donald Trump won 4 years ago by tearing down Hillary Clinton's so-called blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If Joe Biden can rebuild that wall and win all 3 states, he will be the next president. But if he has to rely on Pennsylvania, it could be days before we know the result. However, there is a way we might know tonight the outcome of this race, or at least the likelihood of how it will end. We'll call it the red wall. If Joe Biden wins either Florida, North Carolina, or Georgia tonight, and polls have him leading in at least 2 of them, then he is almost unbeatable. If Trump keeps the red wall, all 3 states, as he did in 2016, then we look again to the blue wall, and that's where it gets tricky. Michael Nutter, we have 2 different vote groups in Pennsylvania, the mail-in early vote and today's vote. They're being counted in different ways. Would you explain the term red mirage and the term blue shift and why they're so crucial to understanding how this could play out in Pennsylvania?
Sure, Jim, and pleased to be here with Alison and David. Thanks for the invitation. Jim, your explanation earlier, though, reminds me of the complication of trying to figure out who's going to the playoffs in the NFL. But in terms of the question that you asked me, so it is well known, and I think the numbers will bear it out, although there may have been some changes in the past few days, primarily because of Donald Trump's rhetoric, that the overwhelming majority of Democrats would be voting by mail because they did not particularly want to get sick from COVID-19 and be in long lines. And that the overwhelming majority of Republicans would be anticipated to vote in person. And so therein lies red mirage and blue shift. On election night, because of technology, those who vote in person on a machine, more than likely, those votes get tabulated not only pretty quickly, but in the course of the evening. Those who have voted by mail, while those, of course, are legitimate actual ballots, it does take some time. And when you look at the difference, for instance, again, as you laid out in your intro, you look at the difference between how Florida handles mail-in versus how Pennsylvania, now under COVID conditions, just for the first time, allowed us to vote, quote unquote, early or by mail without being an absentee voter. Florida gets a 5-week head start. So they will report tonight both mail-in ballots and on the machine ballots with certainty and with a very high percentage of that vote already in. In Pennsylvania, of course, you'll get all the machine vote pretty much in the course of the night, but it will take some time to calculate those mail-in ballots, which again are legitimate. Tonight, it might appear that Donald Trump is ahead in a state like Pennsylvania tonight. But as the voting continues, so that's the red mirage, as the balloting calculation continues for those legitimate mail-in ballots over the next day or so, Joe Biden and Democrats will catch up, and I would predict will exceed the total vote of Donald Trump. That is then the blue shift. And all we can do is ask people to have patience. We did not know on election night on Tuesday in November of 2016 who had won the election, even by midnight. Again, reminding your viewers, Donald Trump didn't make his speech until about 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And so it will just take some time. We should listen to the Commonwealth Secretary, who's in charge of elections in Pennsylvania, as to what is going on and when the election is actually called. Candidates don't get to declare themselves the winner. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will do that.
Michael, you sound very much like the professor that you are.
I'm just trying to imitate you, Jim.
I appreciate that explanation. Alison, we have heard Trump threaten to challenge the vote in Pennsylvania, saying that bad things happen in Philadelphia. Those were his words. Some Democrats are charging that Trump's strategy to invalidate the vote if it doesn't go his way will be what he tries to do. In fact, he may say, according to Democrats who have read Trump's tweets and have heard his statements, that he may even try to say he is the winner in Pennsylvania tonight, even if the state has yet to be called. What do you say? What is your response to all of these claims by Democrats?
Jim, it's really good to be with you and the mayor and David. It's nice to see you all tonight. Look, the president's rhetoric on this is dangerous. The sowing discord in our voting process isn't good for anyone. But here's what I'll say about where we are on the process. Every lawyer and everyone on both sides of the aisle this week that I've talked to that's involved in the election here in Philadelphia has said unequivocally that Pennsylvania is going to be decided in a court. Which court is really an interesting decision to have long term. But I think whether it comes from the Trump campaign or ultimately whether it comes from the Biden campaign, I think both sides are concerned that there are votes out there that aren't counted. But here's why. It's not just because the president has sown distrust in the system or mistrust in the system. It's because of the way that we're processing mail-in ballots this year. And we've never seen this volume in Pennsylvania. So the challenges that may come simply because we've never dealt with this large of a volume. You know, I've talked anecdotally to people that have concerns because they placed tape on their ballot or on their secrecy envelope because it came damaged in the mail, or if my signature doesn't match, is that going to be counted out?
Can I interrupt you for a second? Can I interrupt you for a second? Alison, let me interrupt you for a second.
Don't know what to do.
Forgive me. Mm-hmm. Democrats would say that it's the Republican-controlled legislature in Harrisburg that refused to allow Pennsylvania to count these ballots earlier, where it would have been a more orderly process. No, you don't agree with that?
I absolutely do agree with that we need to be counting them earlier. And I would assume that David would say that this is just good government. The fact that states like Florida have figured out a way to do this and count mail-in ballots before Election Day, I think is really important. And I would charge that is one of the #1 reforms that we should take on post this election. If we're going to be seeing this amount of volume in mail-in ballots, we should be counting them as they come in so that we're not waiting for court challenges and being that state that the nation is looking at because we can't get our act together still days and weeks after the election.
Makes sense. David Thornburgh of the Committee of 70, have you seen any evidence that would back up President Trump's claim that, quote, extending receipt, these are his words, extending receipt of mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania will allow unchecked cheating? What's your response to that, Mr. Thornburgh?
No, that's nonsense. Look, the president actually, in the first debate, affirmed exactly the kind of mail-in voting that Pennsylvania has, which is where voters request an absentee ballot, a mail ballot, and there's a rigorous screening mechanism in place to make sure that those are valid votes. And frankly, Alison and Michael and you have all pointed out this is an extraordinary circumstance, but it seems to me we've got to take the perspective of the voter. And if the voter is following the rules and doing his or her best to get that ballot in on time, then we have to count it. And there is a little bit of a gray zone right now because while the state Supreme Court agreed that we could count ballots that come in up until 5 p.m. on the 6th, those could be in question. Those could be subject to litigation. So our advice to voters has been to get them in as soon as you can now the deadline has passed, but 8 p.m. this evening. So we'll see. We don't really know yet how many ballots that will fall into that gray zone. And frankly, whether or not that's litigated or how fiercely that's litigated is ultimately a question of what the margins look like and what the other states that you mentioned early in the broadcast do before we even get to Pennsylvania.
Forgive me, I was just going to ask all three of you, do all of you assume that if Pennsylvania is close, that the Trump campaign will challenge the extension till Friday back to the Supreme Court, where the Trump campaign might feel, with the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, that they now have a real advantage on the court to invalidate, to discount those late arriving Pennsylvania ballots? Does everybody assume that the Trump campaign will make that effort?
They're going to do everything they possibly can to disenfranchise as many voters as possible. I pick up on David's point. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court did rule that ballots received postmarked by Election Day, but received within 3 days were valid. That went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in a 4-4, I guess, I don't know if you call that a decision, but certainly 4-4 split by the court allowed that to stand. Now you bring in a new justice. You cannot escape the fact that Justice Kavanaugh was a part of the George Bush counting team, legal team back in 2000. We know how that worked out. And so there is great concern about shenanigans by the Trump campaign. How do you have as a part of your strategy having fewer people vote or seeking affirmatively to disenfranchise folks as a part of your strategy to win? I mean, it's seemingly un-American.
Well, Democrats all over the country are now saying that the Republican strategy is to suppress vote, is to invalidate vote, and isn't this country based on the notion that the more people who vote, the better? Alison, how do you respond as a Republican to that accusation that your party strategy is to try to have as few people vote as possible?
Yeah, I think that's dangerous rhetoric, Jim. And the more people that pass that on, the greater the problem becomes. I don't see it happening out there. It's certainly not, it's not talked about in Republican circles that we're trying to suppress votes. In fact, both campaigns talking about constantly, this is a turnout election. The more votes, the better the chance. Like, each campaign is trying to drive people to the polls and have been up until the very last minute tonight. So I think that rhetoric is dangerous. I hope we can stop passing that around, because it's nothing more than rhetoric. It's not a strategy within the campaign. But I do think that to go back to what the mayor was saying about the Trump campaign trying to get this decided in the Supreme Court, the Democrats are trying to get this, when it goes into court challenges, depending on where these suits and cases are brought, it's in the Democrats' best interest to have these decided in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which they've stacked with Democrats for years. So there's malfeasance on both sides here, and I don't think it should all be aimed at Republicans.
Michael Netter, I have 1 minute.
This is not rhetoric. You look at Texas, you look at a number of states, you look at the lawsuits that the Trump administration has filed. There is an active effort to suppress the vote. And unfortunately, that has been the case in the United States as it relates to Black and brown people for centuries. So it is not rhetoric. It is the reality.
Michael, we have 60 seconds. Joe Biden lost Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton lost Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes in 2016. Yep. What is Joe Biden's #1 goal to erase that deficit against President Trump? And do you think he's accomplished it? We'll find out later, but what do you think? And we've got 40 seconds.
He's certainly working very hard. I think you're going to see a max out vote in Philadelphia. I think he'll exceed the margins of 2016 in the suburbs and certainly out west and up into the Lehigh Valley. Joe Biden has pretty much done everything he could possibly do in this election. I think he's in pretty decent shape.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Alison Young, Michael Netter, David Thornburgh. And David, you're going to stay with us for another half hour. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all three of you. We've had a good conversation. Thank you very much for being with us.